All right, let's get right into it. We hear the term narcissism thrown around a lot, but what are the actual mechanics behind narcissistic abuse? Today, we're going to peel back the layers and look at the system that makes it all work, the lies, the manipulation, and ultimately, the relentless push for control.
Here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll tackle the absolute core of the disorder. Then we'll explore how lying isn't just an act, but a central structure. From there, we'll get into the specific tools of manipulation, understand the final goal, which is always control, and finally, we'll look at the very real psychological fallout for the victim.
Okay, so let's start with the most fundamental concept here. For a person with narcissistic personality disorder, manipulation and lying aren't just occasional bad habits. No, it's their entire operating system. It's the primary and really the only tool they have to manage their world, their relationships, and their own fragile sense of self.
And this is precisely what makes it all so insidious and hard to spot. These strategies are almost always hidden behind this very polished facade of charm, of charisma, or even just seeming totally normal. The abuse is systematically masked, which makes it incredibly difficult for the person on the receiving end to even realize what's happening.
So where does this all really begin? Well, it starts with the lie. But it's so important to understand that in this context, a lie isn't just a thing someone says. For the narcissist, it's a structural necessity. It's the very scaffolding that holds up their entire psychological reality. At the absolute heart of the disorder is this concept, the false self. Think of it as an artificial persona. It's this grandiose, perfect, idealized image that they project to the world, and it has to be protected at all costs. But why? Because its main job is to hide the authentic self, a self that the narcissist perceives as weak, flawed, and utterly shameful.
This really lays out the profound internal split, doesn't it? The false self is for public consumption. The authentic self is hidden away in fear. So you see, the constant lying isn't just about fooling other people. It's a permanent internal shield designed to make sure their own deep-seated insecurities are never, ever exposed.
So it's crucial to get that the lie serves multiple strategic functions all at once. It maintains that perfect image by simply denying any reality that contradicts it. It allows them to dodge all responsibility by constantly shifting blame. It's also a practical tool to get what they want, money, status, you name it. And maybe most destructively, it is used to create a constant state of emotional instability and insecurity in their victim. Okay, now let's dig into the specifics. How does this foundation of lies actually get put into practice? Well, it's done through a pretty sophisticated and interconnected toolkit of manipulation techniques, and they all have one aim: to systematically destabilize the victim.
A cornerstone technique is something called intermittent reinforcement. It's this brutal, unpredictable cycle of reward and punishment. One minute you get affection and validation, the next it's suddenly withdrawn and replaced by ice-cold criticism. It works exactly like a slot machine. That unpredictable reward becomes incredibly addictive, and it keeps the victim hooked, constantly chasing that next hit of approval.
Then, of course, there's gaslighting. You can think of this as a rewriting of history. It is a direct assault on a person's sanity. By twisting facts, denying things they said or did, the manipulator slowly makes the victim doubt their own memory, their own perception of reality, until they become completely dependent on the abuser's version of events. Triangulation is another really powerful and damaging tool. This is where a third person is brought into the dynamic. It could be a real person or totally imagined. This person is then used as a point of comparison to create jealousy, competition, and deep insecurity. It constantly puts the victim in a contest they can never win, reinforcing that feeling of being less than.
And this is where the real psychological game comes in. A comment like, "My ex understood me so much better," doesn't sound like a direct attack, does it? But as this quote puts it so perfectly, these comments function like needles of insecurity. They're small, sharp, and incredibly effective at inflicting psychological pain.
And look, these techniques never operate in a vacuum. They are always combined with others, like social isolation, where the abuser will slowly cut the victim off from their friends and family, or strategic concealment, hiding financial information to keep the victim dependent. And then there's the exploitation of empathy, where they'll use their own fabricated sob stories to excuse their abusive behavior.
So what's the point of all this? Where is this all leading? Well, these intricate lies and manipulations are never random acts of meanness. They are deployed, sometimes consciously, sometimes not, to serve one single overarching purpose: to achieve complete psychological and behavioral control over another human being. And this control is built on three really powerful psychological pillars.
First up is cognitive dissonance. This is that mental turmoil where the victim tries to reconcile the wonderful, perfect person from the beginning of the relationship with the cruel, abusive person they see now. Second, that intermittent reinforcement we talked about, which creates that addictive, powerful bond. And third, just sheer emotional exhaustion. The constant conflict and drama just drain the victim's energy until they have no fight left in them.
The end result of this whole cycle is often a phenomenon we call trauma bonding. It sounds completely counterintuitive, but it's a very real and powerful emotional attachment. The victim literally becomes bonded to the source of their pain, and it happens precisely because of that vicious, unpredictable cycle of abuse followed by these little crumbs of kindness.
So finally, let's look at the real-world outcome of this systematic control. The psychological consequences for someone who has endured this are not just unpleasant. They are severe, they are clinically significant, and they are profoundly damaging to a person's entire sense of self. At the end of the day, it all boils down to this one thing. The entire system is designed to completely destroy the victim's autonomy. The goal is to dismantle their ability to think for themselves, to trust their own gut, and to make their own decisions. It leaves them psychologically tethered to the narcissist's warped narrative of reality.
And this leads to a whole cascade of devastating outcomes: a total loss of trust in one's own judgment, chronic, unrelenting stress and fatigue. Often, it results in clinical anxiety and depression. And over time, it creates this deep sense of what's called learned helplessness, where the victim truly starts to believe that there is no way out.
Which leaves us with a really critical question to think about. How does emotional exhaustion systematically lower a person's ability to even recognize manipulation while it's happening? It's a vicious circle. The abuse itself creates the very conditions, the exhaustion, the confusion, that prevents its own recognition, trapping the person in a cycle that is incredibly difficult to see, let alone to break free from.